The actions of Israel are a gross violation of international legal decisions, including the many decisions of the Security Council and the General Assembly. Mr. President, we thank Special Envoy Pedersen and the head of OCHA, Tom Fletcher, for their briefings on the situation in the Syrian Arab Republic, the developments in which are being closely followed by the entire international community. Our friends, the brotherly Syrian people that we have always and will continue to provide support, are going through a new stage in their history. For the time being, it's hard to clearly assess the processes taking place on the territory of Syria. Often they are extremely contradictory in nature. We have not yet seen the resumption of the work of key state institutions and vitally important companies. It is not clear how the inclusive nature of the authorities of the future Syria will be ensured, the need for which we are all declaring. There is a fairly high risk of the intensification of hostilities that have encompassed many regions of the country, in particular Aleppo, Deir ez-Zor, Homs and Quneitra. There are also in the north and the area beyond the Euphrates. In other words, Syria has more than enough problems, and their severity should in no case be underestimated. We would in particular like to point to the direct threat to the territorial integrity of Syria borne by the unlawful actions of Israel, which is carrying out a policy of fait accompli on the occupied Golan Heights, and 500 square kilometers of Syrian land have already been seized. The actions of Israel are a gross violation of international legal decisions, including the many decisions of the Security Council and the General Assembly. We call upon colleagues on the Security Council and also the representatives of the Secretariat of the World Organization to give an honest assessment of events. Mr. President, in these circumstances, Syria continues to face a dire humanitarian crisis that we have heard about today from the head of OCHA. Millions of citizens of this long-suffering country continue to experience serious food shortages and a lack of necessary medical care. That situation has been consistently made worse by Washington, which for several years essentially has occupied the most resource-rich northeastern region of Syria and is also exerting heavy sanctions pressure on Damascus and encouraging its satellites to do the same. As a result, the Syrian economy is under extreme pressure and is not able to cope with the challenges facing the country. Against this extremely worrying backdrop, international humanitarian agencies that have been deprived of their main partners from the Syrian Red Crescent have been forced to start the provision of assistance literally from scratch. Israeli airstrikes and shelling, as well as the rampant violence seen in many regions, is causing suffering, losses among the civilian population, and interrupting the work of civilian infrastructure objects. Regular reports of the disabling of vitally important infrastructure are, of course, of concern. More than 400,000 people in the suburbs of Manbij and Kobani have been left without water and electricity after the hydroelectric power plant at Tishreen stopped working. In the southern part of Idlib and the north of Hama, power grids and roads have been destroyed. Hospitals and primary medical care centers in general across the country are extremely overburdened. In this connection, the primary aim of the new Syrian authorities is we see as being stopping the bloodshed that is lashing the country. The events are not adding to stability, and the past month has forced hundreds of thousands of ordinary Syrians to leave their homes. The conditions that those people are in remain extremely serious. Many of them have been deprived of access to clean water, sanitary conditions, and basic hygiene products. That situation must fundamentally change for the better as soon as possible, and that is something that the overwhelming majority of residents of Syria are in favor of. Mr. President, we all understand that the new authorities need to go a long way in order to rectify the dire socioeconomic situation and establish an effectively functioning state organs. And of course, in order to do that, they need the support of the international community. That, in our view, should be the focus of the efforts of the UN Security Council. Without outside support based on the principles of humanity and impartiality, Syrians simply will not be able to withstand the tests that they have faced. It's extremely important that assistance is provided to all Syrians in all parts of the country without politicization, discrimination, or preconditions. We regret that donors are not keeping their pledges, and the humanitarian plan for 2024 is financed only at a third. And this is despite the significant increase in the already vast needs. They're also not easing illegal unilateral sanctions that are worsening the suffering of the civilian population. It's also important to understand that the Syrian events did not take place in a vacuum. They took place against the backdrop of the ongoing unprecedented escalation of violence in the region that began from Gaza and extended to the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. The extremely dangerous, provocative rhetoric against Tehran is also not abating. In our view, particular responsibility is borne here by the USA, which has blocked all decisions for a ceasefire in Gaza so as not to prevent West Jerusalem from continuing its military operation there. We regret that, because of Washington, the Council has still not been able to fulfill its direct mandate for the maintenance of peace and security. Mr. President, we all also understand very well that Syria will not have a worthy future unless there is a resilient political process. In these circumstances, the key provisions of the Fundamental Security Council Resolution 2254 on the political transition remain fully relevant, as well as the inclusive nature of the political process. Of continued relevance are the demands in the resolution to respect the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria. Impinging upon those foundations or attempts to replace them are unacceptable and could have irreversible consequences for the future of this country. We are convinced that Syrians and Syrians alone, through an inclusive national dialogue, must determine the future of their country, and we call upon all responsible members of the international community to strictly adhere to this approach and to provide the people of Syria all the assistance they need. At the same time, it is unacceptable for there to be any competition among the key external players and neighbors of Syria, the advancing of self-serving agendas or geopolitical interests in the Syrian arena. In this context, we support the efforts of Special Envoy Pedersen for nationwide de-escalation, the resumption of the political process with UN mediation, and the convening of an international conference on Syria with a broad range of participants. Unless all of these approaches are consolidated, the building of a new Syria will be doomed to fail. We very much hope that the Special Envoy will be able to ensure a worthy role in the Syrian settlement for the UN. That would be in line with the long-term interests of this country, the Middle East, and the entire international community. Russia stands ready to participate in those efforts for the sake of the Syrian people and its neighbors. We intend in particular to continue to provide the Syrian people with all sorts of assistance, including through specialized international agencies, through the supply of humanitarian assistance, the reconstruction of social infrastructure objects destroyed during the conflict, and the creation of a material basis for the return of Syrian refugees and internally displaced persons. Thank you.